I never planned on making prayer part of our daily routine. It wasn't calculated, it wasn't optimized, it just happened. My son had questions I couldn't answer with physics, code, or logic. Questions about fear, about kindness, about dreams, and I realized, if I'm building rockets to Mars, but I can't help a child navigate Earth, I've missed something critical. So I started praying with him. And no, this wasn't a religious move. It wasn't about doctrines. It was about alignment of intention, energy, values. What happened next surprised me. Not in a mythological way, but in a deeply human one. Prayer, that simple act, restructured something fundamental in how I think, lead, and live. And that's why you need to stay with me, because what I learned might just reboot something in you too. I live in a world that runs on velocity. Decisions per minute, code commits per hour, meetings in 15-minute intervals. Everything is compressed, optimized for speed, scale, and survival. Efficiency is king, but here's what no one tells you. Efficiency without alignment leads to silent implosion. You can be the most productive person in the room and still be heading in the wrong direction. I didn't see this clearly until I started praying with my son. At first, the idea felt foreign, not irrational, just unnecessary, like a sentimental protocol that didn't match the cold, hard variables I deal with daily. But one night, my son came to me and asked, "Dad, can we talk to God together?" I hesitated, then said yes. Not because I had answers, but because saying no felt like closing a door I didn't fully understand. So we sat, hands together, eyes closed. He started, simple words, grateful ones, honest ones, and something shifted. Not externally, internally. In that moment, the speed of life slowed down just enough to hear something deeper. What he said wasn't complex. Thank you for today. Thank you for the stars. Please help me not be scared when I sleep. It wasn't the content that struck me, it was the alignment. His mind, his emotion, his words all in sync. No filter, no strategy, just pure alignment of intention. And that's when it hit me. I was efficient, but fragmented. I could design sustainable transport systems. I could schedule launches to Mars. I could architect entire infrastructures of human existence, and yet I was disconnected from my own emotional baseline, from purpose, from clarity. I wasn't out of control, I was out of alignment. Prayer became our nightly ritual, just 5 minutes, but that time those few moments of stillness became more powerful than any strategy session I'd ever been in. I realized that while I had optimized my calendar, I had neglected my compass. Here's what alignment means in a high-performance life. It's knowing why you're doing something, not just how to do it faster. It's making decisions that reflect your values, not just your ambitions. It's choosing focus over frenzy, depth over speed, meaning over motion. Now, I'm not saying prayer gave me some magical answer. What it gave me was space. The kind of space where you can zoom out far enough to check your trajectory. Because speed without self-awareness isn't progress, it's just motion. Praying with my son realigned my system, not just spiritually, but cognitively. I started noticing where I was cutting corners on things that actually mattered, where I was saying yes to things just to keep momentum, where I had substituted depth with data and presence with performance. Alignment isn't about being perfect. It's about being honest. And prayer, no matter what you believe, forces that honesty. You can't fake it. You either show up with your full self or you don't. That's what I want more people to understand. You don't need to slow down your ambition. You need to align it with your humanity. Efficiency builds machines. Alignment builds meaning. When you integrate both, you don't just become a better thinker, you become a better father, a better leader, a better human system, and ironically, when you're aligned, you actually become more efficient, not in output, but in impact. I used to think I was raising my son, teaching him how to think, how to solve problems, how to be strong. But over time, something unexpected happened. It became clear that he was revealing more about me than I was teaching him about the world. When we started praying together, I thought I was guiding him, showing him the importance of gratitude, reflection, and intention. But what unfolded was entirely different. Through his words, his questions, and even his silence, he became a mirror, one that reflected back things I had forgotten, or maybe things I had buried. Let me explain. One night, while we were about to pray, he paused and said, "Dad, do you think God gets tired of people asking for stuff?" I asked him why he was thinking about that. He shrugged and replied, "Because I don't want to sound greedy. I just want to say thank you today." That sentence stayed with me. Because here I was, a grown man designing changing technology, and I hadn't paused in weeks just to say thank you. I'd been chasing, building, solving, but gratitude that had been automated, tokenized, stripped of meaning, and in that moment, my son, this small human with a wide heart, revealed my imbalance. I wasn't just guiding him, he was showing me who I was becoming. We often think of children as incomplete adults, as if we're supposed to mold them into our image. But I've learned that children aren't just clay to shape. They're mirrors that reflect the quality of the sculptor. When I watched how my son approached prayer, I could see the values I had modeled and the ones I had neglected. He would always pray for his friends. He never asked for toys. He prayed for people who were sick, for animals, for a planet he didn't fully understand yet. That told me something not just about him, but about the world he was observing through me. If he was praying for peace, maybe he sensed unrest in me. If he prayed that I would sleep more, maybe he noticed I wasn't. His words weren't just sweet, they were data points, showing where I needed recalibration. And that's the part most parents, and even leaders, miss. When you live with a child, you're constantly being evaluated by someone who isn't judging you but absorbing you. Every tone, every habit, every moment of distraction. And when that child opens their heart in prayer, you can see what they've absorbed, not just your words, but your energy. I began to see that prayer wasn't a one-way act. It was a diagnostic tool, and my son, without trying, was holding up a mirror I couldn't ignore. He was reflecting a version of me I wasn't always proud of, and at the same time, reminding me of the man I wanted to be. That shift changed everything. I started becoming more intentional, not just in prayer, but in how I spoke, how I worked, how I rested. Because I realized that my son wasn't just learning from me, he was becoming what I model. And prayer gave us both a space to see that truth without shame. So yes, I thought I was leading. But in reality, I was being revealed. And that revelation didn't make me weaker. It made me human, and that humanity became the foundation for a deeper kind of connection I never knew I needed. In our modern world, where every moment is measured, every second monetized, and every thought transformed into data, finding stillness is a rare commodity. Our minds are wired for constant motion, multitasking, rapid fire decision-making, and a relentless drive to optimize. It's as if we're living in perpetual beta mode. Then I discovered that true clarity isn't achieved through more data. It's born in the moments of absolute stillness. I still recall one evening when my son and I sat quietly before our nightly prayer. In that brief pause, with the rush of my daily schedule on hold, I experienced something striking. The usual noise of my thoughts seemed to vanish. In its place came an expansive silence that allowed me to see, almost in slow motion, the layers of my mind like a clear, unedited code. That night, I understood that the silence wasn't empty. It was filled with potential, much like the quiet before a rocket launch, where every second counts for recalibration. There is a peculiar paradox at work. When we slow down, we start moving mentally at an accelerated pace. My mind, usually so bombarded by work, tweets of urgent emails, and the endless logic of business, suddenly found the space to ask, what really matters? In that stillness, I could reflect without distraction. The relentless pace of efficiency had left me with a system running on autopilot, a mind that was optimized in performance, but not in purpose. The prayer ritual was like hitting a pause button on the hard drive, allowing a defragmentation of thought. In those moments, clarity emerged. It was as if my cognitive whiteboard was wiped clean, making room for high-level ideas and emotional insight. I began noticing details that were previously buried under the noise. The subtle shift in my tone when speaking to my team, the way stress had infiltrated decisions, and even the unnoticed beauty of everyday moments. I realized that what I had perceived as a loss of momentum was actually a necessary deceleration, a crucial recalibration of focus and values. This newfound clarity wasn't simply a byproduct of quiet reflection, it was transformative. In the silence of our prayer, my thoughts transitioned from the mechanical processing of what is being done to an exploration of why we do it. For instance, my decisions in business started to reflect not just data points or market trends, but deeper, more human-centric values. I learned that clarity comes from connecting to one's fundamental purpose, a purpose that doesn't get updated as frequently as software does. I often compare it to the process of debugging in a complex system. When your code runs with errors, it's only when you step back, halt the rapid execution, and methodically review the system that you start to understand where the misalignment occurs. In our nightly stillness, I became my own debugger, scanning for areas of emotional dissonance and strategic misalignment. Each moment of quiet was a diagnostic check that helped me understand the systemic issues in my own thought processes. This clarity, achieved through stillness, influenced every facet of my life. It redefined productivity not as the sum of outputs, but as the quality of our insights and the integrity of our decisions. In that silence, I found that the noise of endless activity was not synonymous with progress. Real progress came from refining our internal algorithms, the ones that balance rational calculation with genuine human connection. In the end, what started as a simple nightly ritual with my son evolved into an invaluable period of introspection and clarity. This stillness not only recalibrated my internal systems, but also reminded me of the importance of pausing, even momentarily, to optimize for what truly matters. And it's in that rare, quiet space that true, lasting innovation can take root. For most of my life, I approached reality like an engineer, measurable, solvable, testable. If it couldn't be quantified, I questioned its value. That kind of mindset is effective when you're building rockets, AI systems, or transportation networks. But when it comes to navigating emotions, purpose, and meaning, the core drivers of human experience, pure logic becomes insufficient. I used to think of faith as a soft concept, vague, sentimental, something people leaned on when they lacked data, but that was a miscalculation. Faith, I've come to realize, isn't about rejecting logic. It's about complementing it with structure for the intangible parts of life. And when I began praying with my son, I encountered faith not as blind belief, but as an emotional operating system. Let me explain that concept clearly. Every complex system needs an OS, something that integrates all functions, prioritizes tasks, manages energy, and keeps the system coherent under stress. In technology, that's software. In humans, it's often faith. It's what bridges the gap between what we know and what we feel. When my son prays, I hear his fears, hopes, gratitude, and confusion. He doesn't censor it. He doesn't form at it like a pitch. He just offloads it into a framework, prayer, that can hold all those mixed inputs. And what's incredible is how consistent the emotional output becomes. After prayer, there's calmness, centering, confidence. That's not coincidence. That's system-level processing. Faith, in this sense, doesn't mean subscribing to a particular religion or doctrine. It means engaging in a disciplined way of directing emotion, thought, and intent towards something higher than fear or instinct. It organizes chaos. It provides fallback logic when the world doesn't make sense. In the high-stakes environments I operate in, we often build safes, backup systems, contingency protocols, but in personal life, most people are operating without one. That's where faith enters. It's the fallback system for the soul. When data fails, when plans collapse, when fear spikes, faith holds you steady. I noticed this especially with my son. If he had a bad day, prayer didn't erase the pain, but it gave it context. If he was anxious, prayer didn't remove the uncertainty, but it gave him language to frame it. That's not wishful thinking. That's emotional engineering at its finest. We use words like emotional intelligence in business, but rarely do we ask, what is the source code for that intelligence? Faith, whether expressed through prayer, mindfulness, or belief in purpose, provides that source code. It teaches empathy. It cultivates resilience. It shapes your responses when life goes off script. And here's the crucial insight. We can't scale humanity through AI, space travel, or advanced tech if we lose the very structures that stabilize our inner world. Faith, in whatever form you practice it, is part of that structure. It's not anti-science. It's not irrational. It's not obsolete. It's the emotional architecture that allows logic to function without becoming inhumane. By praying with my son, I installed something into my own emotional OS that I didn't realize I was missing. It made me more grounded, more aware, and paradoxically, more capable of making clear, logical decisions. Because I was no longer running solely on mental bandwidth, I was tapping into emotional equilibrium. Faith isn't just belief in something bigger. It's belief in the meaning of our actions, in the connectivity between people, and in the resilience of the human spirit when logic isn't enough. And when you have that system running in the background, your capacity to build, lead, and love scales exponentially. Leadership, in its most traditional form, is about vision, decision making, and the ability to move people toward a common goal. I've operated by that framework for most of my career, building companies, launching technologies, taking risks others avoid. But what I never expected was how praying with my son would fundamentally alter how I lead, not in process, but in presence. I had always believed that leadership was output-driven, clear goals, high expectations, relentless pursuit, and to some extent, that's true. But over time, I realized that while I was building scalable systems, I was becoming emotionally unscalable. I was efficient but not accessible, respected but not always understood. Then came the practice of prayer, With my son beside me, I began entering a space where leadership didn't require charisma or performance. It required vulnerability, clarity, stillness, and it reintroduced a human layer into my decision, making a kind of inner recalibration that no productivity app or boardroom could offer. Prayer didn't turn me into a different person. It revealed the parts I had sidelined in the name of momentum. It showed me that true leadership isn't about how loud your vision is, it's about how deeply it's rooted in something meaningful. That's what people follow. That's what inspires sustainable trust. After a few weeks of prayer, something subtle but significant began to shift in how I ran teams. I wasn't just asking, is this idea bold enough? I was asking, is this aligned with our deeper purpose? I wasn't just reviewing metrics. I was listening not to numbers, but to people, their fears, their values, their unspoken signals. I noticed that the more I integrated emotional awareness into my leadership, the more clarity I had when chaos hit. In business, crisis is inevitable. The market shifts, plans collapse, partnerships fracture, and in those moments, you default to your internal code. Prayer helped me rewrite that code not by making me more cautious, but by making me more intentional. It taught me to pause before reacting, to lead from presence, not pressure, to respond not just to problems, but to the people experiencing those problems. That shift wasn't sentimental, it was structural. It created stronger teams, clearer culture, and more resilient decision-making. You see, when you lead from ego or fear, your energy becomes unstable. People sense it. They react to it. But when you lead from alignment, when your inner values match your outer actions, your leadership becomes magnetic. It's not about control, it's about coherence. That's what prayer gave me, coherence. Between thought and action, between strategy and soul, it made me realize that leadership isn't just about moving forward, it's about anchoring downward into something deeper than ambition. And yes, this came from something as simple as praying with a child. But that's the point. Sometimes it takes the most unoptimized act, sitting still, closing your eyes and speaking from the heart to restore what data can't deliver. In the end, leadership changed for me not because I discovered a new tactic, but because I rediscovered an old truth. You cannot lead others well if you are not in alignment with yourself. You cannot inspire if you are spiritually fragmented. You cannot build the future if you've lost touch with the present. Now, I lead with more precision and more compassion because I'm no longer operating on logic alone. I'm guided by something deeper, and the surprising path to it began with a child's prayer. One of the biggest misconceptions people have about prayer is that it's inherently religious, that to pray is to subscribe to a system, a doctrine, or a specific image of a higher power. But after months of sitting with my son in quiet reflection, I've come to realize something very different. Prayer isn't about religion, it's about presence. In fact, it's one of the few practices in modern life that demands your full, undivided attention without expecting productivity in return. There's no transaction, no immediate result, no ROI in the conventional sense. It's just you, your thoughts, your breath, and an intention. And in a world that's built on distraction, that level of presence is revolutionary. When I began praying with my son, I wasn't following a spiritual rulebook. We didn't rehearse lines or memorize texts. We just spoke, honestly, simply, and what I noticed was profound. In those moments, he wasn't on his device. I wasn't checking my calendar. The world paused, and we were completely there. That kind of stillness is rare, and more importantly, it's needed. We've built a society obsessed with the next notification, the next milestone, the next version of everything. But in prayer, there is no version 2.0, there is no upgrade, there's only now, and that's what makes it powerful, because presence, more than any tool, is what keeps our human system stable. Presence is where self-awareness begins. It's the platform where honesty uploads. It's the environment where clarity, empathy, and discipline can be reinstalled. Think of prayer as internal firmware maintenance. If meditation is a reboot, prayer is a real, time-operating check one that detects what you've been ignoring or suppressing. When you strip away religion, what's left in prayer is incredibly universal. Gratitude, reflection, intention, humility, connection, all things every human being needs regardless of belief system. My son doesn't have complex theology. But when he prays, I see how naturally he aligns with presence. He speaks about his day, what he noticed, what scared him, what he hopes for tomorrow. It's pure. And it's that purity that reminded me how detached I had become from the now. As adults, we often exist in the past or future, regret and ambition, but presence, we outsource it to entertainment, to noise, to endless motion. But praying with him reintroduced me to still attention, to the art of being fully engaged in a single moment without needing to control it. And ironically, that presence made me more effective in every other part of my life. I became more focused in meetings, more attuned in conversations, more patient in decision-making, not because I slowed down my ambitions, but because I tuned into where I was, not just where I was going. Presence leads to better leadership, deeper relationships, and more authentic creation. And prayer, detached from religious obligation, becomes the tool that trains that presence. It asks nothing from you but your attention, and that's what makes it so difficult and so transformative. If you're skeptical of prayer, that's fine. I was too. But what I learned is that you don't have to believe in a specific divine being to benefit from it. All you need is the willingness to stop, to listen, to reflect, and to recenter your internal compass before re-entering the chaos of the world. In the end, praying with my son wasn't about building faith in the traditional sense. It was about building focus, connection, and emotional clarity, one moment of presence at a time. And sometimes that's the upgrade we need most.